Hey, what's up guys? This is Max with Because Bitcoin, and today we're going to be talking about the ETH BTC pair and when it is potentially time to rotate out of Bitcoin into Ethereum and other high beta plays as we approach the next Bitcoin halving in roughly April of 2024. Let's dive into the charts. Ethereum wasn't around for the first Bitcoin halving, so I've got the three halvings that Ethereum will have been around for. The next one hasn't happened yet, of course, but the first halving that Ethereum was around for throughout its history was July 9th, the second Bitcoin halving, July 9th, 2016. Of course, the last one, the third Bitcoin halving, May 11th of 2020. And then we've got the next one coming up in very end of Q1 or early Q2 of 2024. Now, for those that are not familiar with what the ETH BTC chart even is, I'll do a very quick explanation of it. This is just Ethereum denominated in Bitcoin rather than US dollars. So if you see something like this and you see the ETH BTC chart going straight up in a straight line, it can mean one of two things. One, it could mean that we're in a raging bull market and Ethereum and Bitcoin are both performing extremely well. And if the ETH BTC chart is going like this, it means that Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin to the upside. And on the flip side of that, if you're seeing ETH BTC move up like this and we're in a bear market, it could mean, typically it doesn't, but it could mean that Ethereum is not nuking as hard as Bitcoin. So it would mean that Ethereum would be a better hold. Whenever you see ETH BTC moving up, it just means that it's better to have a Ethereum heavy portfolio versus a Bitcoin heavy portfolio. But typically during periods of ETH BTC mania, where you see the ETH BTC chart going up like this, typically, not always, but typically we're in some sort of bull market or expansionary period. Both Ethereum and Bitcoin are performing well in their US dollar pairings, but Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin to the upside. So of course you'd want to be heavy Ethereum, and then when the time is right, rotate back into Bitcoin. And again, my own philosophy on it is that Bitcoin is the better asset to hold and store wealth in for the long term. The only reason to truly hold Ethereum would be to just try to outperform Bitcoin in order to rotate back into Bitcoin in order to increase your Bitcoin denominated net worth. Or I guess if you wanted to maybe buy an NFT and transact, on chain or something like that. But nonetheless, let's dive in and let's take a look at how Ethereum has performed as Bitcoin has approached a halving event, and how we could potentially use this data historically, looking left on the chart, to time out when the next potential rotation would come into play to rotate out of Bitcoin and into Ethereum. So we're going to put these back on here. These are all the Bitcoin halvings. We're going to start with the first one right here. So again, this was a long time ago, right? So at the time, this is the Bitcoin chart here. This is the Ethereum chart here. Ethereum was at $10 and Bitcoin was at sub 1,000. So this was a long time ago. And full disclosure, we only have a couple data points here, so nothing is etched in concrete. All right, anything can happen in these markets. It's crypto. It's the Wild West. But really, all you can do as a trader and an investor is use historical data and look left to try to predict what might happen in the near future. So looking back at the first halving, you can see that more or less, going back to this point. Oops, sorry, that's a little messy. We'll redraw that one. So going back, you can see that leading up to the first Bitcoin halving that Ethereum was around for, all the way through the halving, it made more sense to hold Bitcoin up until about this point right here. And then, of course, you saw Ethereum dramatically outperform Bitcoin. Now, let's just take a quick look at what happened during this point in time on actual ETH USD and BTC USD. So again, we've already established that for the first Bitcoin halving that Ethereum was around for, which was the second halving, during this time leading up to the halving and through the halving, it made more sense to hold Bitcoin. Now let's just take a look at performance and see how the individual assets did. So from this high point over here, and again, this is Bitcoin right here, this bottom chart is Ethereum. Let's take a measured move. So all the way up until the point when it really made sense to rotate into Ethereum, Bitcoin went up 182%. And again, I'll just mark this out quick. This is where you would have wanted to rotate into Ethereum. Let's see how Ethereum did during that time. From this same candle right here, So from the, we'll measure it from the low. We'll give it a little bit of wiggle room. Up until when you would have wanted to hit that rotation, ETH technically went up, but it only went up 33% when Bitcoin went up 182%. And then, of course, on the next leg up, the expansion, then when we saw ETH BTC put in this crazy move up here that went up, from that point, 2,000% against Bitcoin. I mean, just take a look at how the outperformance stacked up here. So from this point up until the parabola, ETH went up 6,100%, and BTC went up from this point right here. We'll just take it from the low. We'll keep it consistent. Couple 1,000%. All right, so there was dramatic outperformance and a huge incentive to hold Ethereum versus Bitcoin when the ETH BTC pair bottomed. Now, how do we determine when we want to actually hit that rotation? Well, I think it's mostly going to be just time-based and cycle-based. So let's just take a few time-based measured moves here. So again, from the actual date of the halving, oops, that's the wrong one. From the actual date of the halving, the 120 days roughly leading up to the halving, the second Bitcoin halving, the first one that Ethereum was around for, Ethereum bled back into or against Bitcoin, however you want to look at it. And then it didn't really make sense to hold Ethereum versus Bitcoin until roughly, let's just say 170-ish days, okay, after the first Bitcoin halving. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll take a look at the last one. So leading up to the halving, and again, I am a proponent of lengthening cycles and diminishing returns. So these cycles should elongate and not offer as much froth as the previous ones. So you can see here, I mean, if we just go back 126 days, things were relatively choppy, uneventful. Okay, I mean, you could have made the case if you timed it perfectly, buying some Ethereum, at the bottom of this broadening wedge every time. You could have for sure bought Ethereum rather than Bitcoin at any of these lulls. At the time, you didn't know that they were going to happen, but hindsight's 20/20. So you could have bought here and been fine. You could have bought here and been fine. But more or less, this is just kind of a range, right? Like we were just, going back a little further. I mean, you can see that this is more or less like a range that ETH BTC was in right here. All right. So we didn't really do much, and you could make the case it really didn't make a ton of sense to be heavy Ethereum post Bitcoin halving until about this point. You could have potentially spec'd at any one of these drops and been just fine, but you didn't really see dramatic outperformance for Ethereum against Bitcoin up until this point. We had 200% outperformance, and that came roughly 300 days after the 2020 Bitcoin halving. All right. So again, leading up to the halving, and again, I'm a proponent of lengthening cycles and diminishing returns. Although again, you could have bought it at one of these lulls here and been fine. It didn't really make sense to hold Ethereum until again about 300 days after the Bitcoin halving. And you could maybe again make the case, well, I could have bought it here and had outperformance. But really, you didn't see that sustained outperformance, that parabola take form until about 300 days after. All right. But I'm open to debate. If you want to say here, that's fine too. But we're going to be conservative and just pick the last point. All right. But up until this point, it really didn't make sense to hold ETH against BTC during this entire drawdown. I mean, this was painful to hold Ethereum versus Bitcoin. I mean, serious underperformance. But we won't count all of this. We'll just kind of go back to the accumulation before the last halving. Going right here, let's just go back another 300 days, even a year. We had serious underperformance. Just going from this point right here up until the halving, we had a 30 to 40% drawdown of ETH compared to Bitcoin. All right. So again, it made more sense leading up to the halving to hold Bitcoin if you're going to hold any crypto assets versus Ethereum. You would definitely want it to be Bitcoin heavy. All right. So again, similarly to the last one, a little bit different because this happened much quicker, but we had the bleed leading up to the halving, and then we had a continued bleed through the halving, and then we caught a crazy rotation, 100 to 300 days after. Again, same thing right here. Now, what am I expecting here for the next Bitcoin halving? All right, so we got a little bit of time. It's July 17th. To me, again, just looking at this, being versed in TA, this looks pretty heavy to me. It looks like distribution. We know that leading up to the halving, historically, it's made a lot more sense if you're going to own any crypto assets to be overwhelmingly long Bitcoin versus Ethereum, and then hit that rotation into Ethereum post Bitcoin halving. So we got a little bit of time. Let's take a time-based move here. So we've got roughly 3/4 of a year, 266 days. I'm on the weekly chart, so it rounds a little bit, but 250 plus days until the next Bitcoin halving, which is estimated in April 2024. I'm expecting a sustained bleed with very small pockets of Ethereum outperformance until we ultimately get to our next, blast off phase for Ethereum. And my gut's telling me it's going to rhyme with the previous two ones. Again, where we've seen underperformance before the halving, again, right here and right here. And then really just, if anything, best case, probably chop, like we saw, during this period, before we see another expansion, like we did, for this move and we did for this move. Okay. We're getting a little messy here. I'll clean up the chart just a little bit here. We'll remove this. So where are some levels that I'm potentially looking at? I'm not exactly expecting too much until then. So if I want to just take like a high time frame look on it, I would say that a pretty nice level, and I marked this out earlier, would be kind of coming back to retest this, this support right here. There's a lot of high time frame confluence right here. We had this big expansionary period of ETH against Bitcoin back over here. We had sort of our capitulation or accumulation phase, before the next expansionary period. I wouldn't necessarily expect us to come back too deep and, go underneath this line. But it wouldn't surprise me to see, something like this coming back in to retest this high time frame support, where again you get periods of outperformance of ETH against Bitcoin, but ultimately it's a sustained bleed, into the halving, or maybe it doesn't go quite that low. Maybe we were like here, and then post halving, then we go down, and then it would make sense to rotate somewhere around here, give or take. One other thing I wanted to point out, we've already determined that it makes leading up to the halving and then through the halving, it makes sense if you're going to be long crypto assets to be overwhelmingly overweight Bitcoin versus Ethereum. And just a reminder too, if ETH is bleeding against BTC, I promise you your favorite altcoin, Solana, Matic, BNB, Optimism, you name it, your favorite altcoin is likely bleeding against Ethereum. So if Ethereum is getting beat up against Bitcoin, and let's just say Solana or Matic or BNB is getting beat up against ETH, imagine what some of those pairs look like against Bitcoin. I mean, not the time to be overweight alts, and there will come a time to be overweight alts. One other thing I wanted to point out here is the ETH BTC. These are the monthly returns historically for Ethereum against Bitcoin. We'll move this forward. Oops. Bring to front. So you can see here that typically January, February, March, April, May, historically, again, going back throughout the entire history, and again, we didn't really have it in 2015, but all the history we can compile of Ethereum monthly returns against Bitcoin, the first half of the year has been significantly better than the latter half. Typically, the first half of the year, Ethereum performs better than Bitcoin, and then as we get into those summer months, June, July, August, through the end of the year, typically Ethereum bleeds back into Bitcoin, or I guess bleeds against Bitcoin. So again, right now it's July 17th. June, this is 2023. June was a red month for ETH BTC. July so far, again, July's not over, has so far been a little bit red. And throughout the rest of the year, if history's any indication, you will likely see, more likely than not, based on historical returns, you'll typically see Ethereum underperform Bitcoin. So if that would mean, again, one of two things. If the crypto asset class is extremely bullish and Bitcoin and Ethereum are both going, higher than they are right now, it would indicate that Bitcoin is likely outperforming Ethereum to the upside, which again, it would make sense to hold more Bitcoin than ETH, or if we see a sustained pullback in crypto and Ethereum and Bitcoin both trade down lower than they are currently, that would mean that Bitcoin would go down less than Ethereum. So again, looking at this, nothing is etched in concrete. Anything can happen. There's been plenty of green months that have happened here. You can see, for example, 2022, July was very good last year for Ethereum against Bitcoin. But holistically looking at the whole picture and not just cherry picking 1 month or 2 months, the latter half of the year hasn't been great. All right, so let's hide this again. It's July. If we were to see a sustained bleed throughout the end of the year, and maybe we have a green month here and there, you could see something like this, and maybe you get a month of outperformance. Again, something like this, down post halving, and then potentially when we're 100, 200 days out, after the next Bitcoin halving, then potentially we look to make that rotation wherever it may be into ETH BTC again, like would have been right in here. It would have been on the first one. It would have been right here. And then, we could look for that next expansionary period, a couple hundred days after the next Bitcoin halving. And for me personally, I'm expecting ETH BTC to make new highs. I think that Ethereum will continue to outperform Bitcoin, at least for the next couple cycles. It doesn't mean it's a better hold long term for store of wealth, but if we're just talking about select periods of Ethereum outperformance relative to Bitcoin, I would expect sort of another expansion like this. I mean, just from a technical perspective, we've got a lot of highs, that could certainly be tagged. Like, a lot of highs up here I'd like to see get taken out. And truthfully, I think that ETH BTC could go on to make a new all-time high, and we'll look back on this as more or less this. We've already seen this. I can delete these now. I think that we'll look back on this period right here. This was previous demand right here. So we'll thicken this up a little bit right here, and we'll add some text. We'll call this demand. We'll make this text much larger. This is previous demand, and I think this is expansion or a breakaway or breakout of demand. Let's hide these halving cycles. We don't need them right now. And you could probably look to consider this. This was demand, breakout or expansion, and then we're going to come back and retest the previous demand zone, confirm that actually is sustained demand, or the market deems that that's a cheap or fair valuation for ETH against BTC, and then we'll see another period of expansion, and we might look back on this period. We might look back on this period right here in 2026, 2027 as another demand zone, and maybe we'll do something like this, and then come back and retest this demand zone just like we did, that I'm proposing is possible for this one. So anyways, a lot of things can happen, but for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be overweight Ethereum. And again, if history is any indication, we know that the latter half of the year, just look at the bottom here, it's been disgusting. It's been absolutely disgusting. So even if you're very bullish crypto here and you think, Bitcoin's going 40, 50K, and ETH's going, 2,000 plus, if this chart is any indication, and again, it doesn't have to be, but you have to use history to try to paint a picture of what could potentially happen in the coming months and years for crypto, as an investor and a trader. If history is any indication, I would make a calculated bet that even if things are really bullish right now, you'll probably see Bitcoin dominance go up dramatically, and you'll see ETH bleed back into Bitcoin. That would propel that next rally or next leg up for the crypto asset class. And I would assume if that happens and things still remain bullish, then Bitcoin would drag ETH up with it, kicking and screaming, and people that were overweight ETH would be a little bit upset because Bitcoin would be up 10% on a day and ETH might be up 5%, which is still a great day, but you're going to be upset that you're not happy Bitcoin. Or on the flip side of that, just a reminder too, like Bitcoin could go back to 20K, and ETH could potentially go on to make a new low or something like that. So if we do get the nuke scenario and crypto's extremely bearish here, either way, you're not going to want to be long Ethereum versus Bitcoin. So you know, it's your money. You can decide, you know, what your risk tolerance is and, you know, what your time frame is that you're looking to be an investor for. But I'm just here to present the data and paint a picture of what I think could potentially happen. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you guys found this video useful. This is Because Bitcoin. We're a financial media company with a very heavy emphasis on digital assets. We're all a bunch of traders, very active. If you enjoyed the video also, please consider taking a look at our website and some of the premium offerings that we have down in the description below. We've got a premium Discord group with a bunch of traders and BB analysts. We share all of our positions and additional analysis in real time. It gives you an opportunity to talk with us as well on a day-to-day basis. We host, private live morning streams for the New York Open and the New York Close for those that are more active. And again, it's just a really great place to hang out, meet like-minded individuals, share ideas. And again, myself and my entire team, we are in there constantly trading ideas, day trading. We trade equities as well. And then additionally, through our website, you'll see that we got premium research reports. We talk about things like this. So if you enjoyed this video and you want it, in a PDF version accessible on our website, thorough breakdown, we got plenty of, high time frame analysis in print for you guys on our website. So thanks so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.